Hello, everybody. David Shuster here. Jessica Tarlov, the lone liberal host on Fox, keeps proving she's a national treasure amidst the conservative garbage on Fox News. Tarlov just shamed her right-wing colleagues in epic fashion on live television. The issue involved the deportation and indefinite imprisonment of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The Department of Justice admits his deportation to a jail in El Salvador was a mistake, and the U.S. Supreme Court, by a 9-0 ruling, said the Trump administration should facilitate Garcia's release. But the Trump administration is refusing, and conservatives, including Fox's Jeanine Pirro, keep citing an unproven claim about Garcia by a disgraced law enforcement officer. Tarlov is hitting back. Watch.
Abrego Garcia, there is no proof that he was an MS-13 member, and it has been debunked many times.
It's been debunked
yes, it
by
has.
liberal
It was
newspapers.
That's not true.
In a court of law,
Stop.
a section I-113 or 123 is reliable, verifiable proof that you are a member of a gang, and he was never able to rebut it.
It was based on double hearsay testimony and also a detective who was indicted merely weeks later for providing confidential information to a sex worker. He was also allegedly an alcoholic. That's how we got into this. But the point is that this man has been living in this country out in public, meeting on an annual basis with his DHS caseworker. He goes in once a year. He talks to them. They know where he works. He's an on-the-books worker. This is not somebody who is a gangbanger. This is not somebody who has committed any other crime besides being here in this country. And he came here also based on credible threat of being murdered by a gang at home who was threatening his entire family.
Facts. Tarlov calmly but firmly cited facts, and Jeanine Pirro couldn't say a word. Because when the make-believe nonsense of Pirro and other conservatives gets stacked up against reality and the truth, the Trump talking points fall apart. Tarlov wasn't done humiliating the Fox conservative. She pointed out that under the very law the Trump administration is citing, the 1790s Alien Enemies Act, people in America from a country at war with the United States are still required to receive due process before being deported or imprisoned. This has always been the case under the law, including during World War II.
Under the Alien Enemies Act, you deserve due process. And that's what the Supreme Court ruled. And if you go back to World War II, when we were invoking this same act, that people who were here undocumented from Japan, from Germany, from Italy, were allowed to go into a court where they could argue that they weren't a danger to this nation. Abrego Garcia was not afforded that right to come into court and to argue as to why he should not be deported. And it is not the same thing to deport someone to their home country as to send them to a prison.
Well, then,
you know that.
First of all, the 9-0 decision by the Supreme Court held that the judge was wrong to think that she or he could enjoin the whole nation and dictate to a president international policy.
Facilitate his return.
No. The facilitation, as the Attorney General herself said, was that if they decide to return him.
Actually, the U.S. Supreme Court ordered the Trump administration to facilitate Garcia's return from El Salvador. And the Trump administration has facilitated other migrant returns from El Salvador, merely by asking the El Salvadoran government and President Bukele for release. But the Trump administration is not asking in Garcia's case and is thereby defying the U.S. Supreme Court.
You can see a full-blown constitutional crisis playing out in front of our eyes. The Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that he had to be returned. President Bukele is lying when he says that he can't get him back. We know that he can return people because he returned people from the original shipment. There were women that were sent there, and he said, oh, no, you shouldn't be here. And there were some Venezuelans that he didn't want. He said, okay, you shouldn't be here, and he shipped them on back. They think that it's funny. Getting that hot mic moment where Donald Trump and the El Salvadorian president are talking, they're kind of loitering around at the front of the Oval Office, where they're joking about, like, oh, wouldn't it be great if you could take our homegrown ones? You cannot legally send Americans to an El Salvadorian prison camp, no matter what they have done. Senator Kennedy was on our air earlier this afternoon with Sandra and John and said as much.
Whether or not you agree with the president's suggestion of sending U.S.-born, U.S. citizens accused and who have committed crimes to notorious prisons like the one in El Salvador.
You mean sending them to foreign countries?
Yes.
No, I don't agree with that.
Senator Kennedy does not agree with sending Americans to be jailed in a foreign country. And he's one of the most conservative members of the U.S. Senate. Now, to be fair, Jessica Tarlov is not the only Fox host who has condemned the Trump administration's defiance of the U.S. Supreme Court in the Garcia case, former Republican House member Trey Gowdy, who hosts a weekend show on Fox, is also saying on Fox that the Trump administration is wrong.
So what do you think the White House should do in this situation?
I mean, I think what they ought to do is probably follow the judge's order and the Supreme Court decision, which used the word facilitate. Also in that opinion, Martha, were the words accidental, mistake, and illegal. I mean, those are not three good words you want in a Supreme Court decision. So, look, I don't want the guy in the United States. Although I will say this, if the press secretary's facts are right, it should be a pretty easy conviction. And do I have more confidence in U.S. prisons or El Salvadorian prisons? U.S. prisons. I don't know if you remember Pablo Escobar or not in Colombia, but that was more like the sanctuary at Kiowa or the Ritz-Carlton. That's not a real prison. So I have more confidence in U.S. prosecutors. I have more confidence in the U.S. prison system. If the president doesn't agree with that, and he may not, then bring him back and then remove him to another country. Appeal the removal order. But what we can't have is any executive disobeying or not following a judge's decision, even if you disagree with it.
Gowdy underscored that the solution to all of this is simple and easy. The Trump administration should ask El Salvador to release Garcia, bring Garcia back to the United States, and give Garcia a hearing and the due process that our Constitution requires. If the Trump Justice Department has evidence that Garcia is a terrorist or gang member, they should present that evidence in court. And if the evidence is clear, a judge will then rule that Garcia can be deported. But for the Trump administration to simply bypass the Constitution and defy the U.S. Supreme Court, that is outrageous. And don't take my word for it, or Jessica Tarlov's or Trey Gowdy's. Even the late conservative Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia would be infuriated by the Trump administration. You see, years ago, in a case about due process, he wrote, "It is well established that the Fifth Amendment entitles aliens to due process of law in deportation hearings." So this isn't complicated. Kudos to Jessica Tarlov for trying to break it down, though, in easy-to-understand terms and with basic facts. She may never convince the conservatives on the five, but when history records who spoke out for the Constitution and against the fascist impulses of the Trump administration, Jessica Tarlov will be remembered as a hero. By the way, House Republican Marjorie Taylor Green is on the defensive over insider trading allegations. Marjorie Taylor Green's suspicious stock trade soared 29% despite tariffs. And Rep. Marjorie Taylor Green's 17 stock buys in the market crash turned to profits after Trump's tariff pause.
You know, given what the government's been doing and this administration's been doing, it would not shock me, and I hate to speculate, if we were to find out that a whole bunch of people who work in Washington as our elected leaders, one way or the other, ultimately sold stocks last week, or potentially worse than that, shorted the market.
Check out that video at the link below. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.